Welcome back to Epic Exchanges. I'm your host, Kelly Snider, and as you know, I am passionate about sharing guests and introducing you to guests that share stories that empower and inspire us all. And I am really excited to have today's guest back. Kelly was on our podcast back in the fall, sharing her story, but today she's back because she is another one of the authors in our collaborative book, The Strength to Shift, that was just released last week. And she is here to share a little bit about her story and her experience. Hi, Kelly, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Kelly Mariah, and I am a certified Maxwell Leadership Coach, speaker, and trainer. I'm also a certified DISC trainer and a consultant for the Motions of the Soul Enneagram.
Awesome. That's a lot. And maybe some people don't know about it, about what those things are. And we can maybe get into that a little bit later. But why don't you just dive in and share a little bit about your story and your experience as being part of this book?
Sure. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Kelly, for giving me the opportunity to have a place to be able to share my story. My story, my chapter in the book is called Surviving the Storm. And I'll just tell you, it just starts from the morning of September 7th, 2011. And it was a normal day. Anybody who's from the Dayton, Ohio area knows in the fall, it can be just kind of gloomy and you don't see the sun again until spring. And it was one of those days. It was a little misty, and I got my youngest daughter off to school that morning, and then came home and ate my breakfast. And my oldest son was home for the day, had the day off, and we just watched some cold case files together, which was just something we enjoyed doing together. And the day, went on. I needed to get myself going because I was meeting some friends for a book study that I was doing. And so I had Tommy go and pick up his younger sister from school, went to my study, had a wonderful, wonderful day studying with my friends, came home. My husband and my daughter were getting ready to go to the grocery store and go grocery shopping, and they invited me to go along. And grocery shopping is something I really do not enjoy at all. And I never ever went with them. And I don't know why, but for some reason I was inclined to say yes. And so I went with them to the store that evening. And there were some difficult things that occurred, and we ended up being delayed from the store. And when we arrived home, that really began just one of the darkest storms in my life that I've experienced to this date. And so that's kind of what the chapter starts with and how it goes.
Right. And we don't want to give away the whole chapter because we want people to buy the book and read your story and feel the full impact of your story. Uh, can we talk for a moment just about the experience? This isn't the first time you've shared this story, but what was it like to actually write it with the intention that it was going to be published in a book and be available for anyone to read?
Sure. I would tell you that doing this project was challenging for sure. It was harder than I expected, I'll tell you that, but very exciting. It's exciting to be able to be given a platform or a place where I can share my story, because it is my desire to help other people with the difficult things that I've experienced. I mentioned that it was harder than I was expecting in it, and I would say that's because rewriting and re-going through the details of that day was very triggering for me. And it took me longer and was a little more difficult to get through writing the story than I expected. However, I would also say it was worth every moment of that. Coming through that, it made me write out the timeline of that day, which I had never done before. It's been 13 years almost, and I had never done that before. I just had all these kind of fragmented memories of that day. And I would say doing this made me make that timeline. And so it gave me a sense of completeness that I was not expecting. I almost feel like something's been resolved. A piece of my heart has been like resolved or completed, which brings me another sense of wholeness and healing that I was not expecting just by doing this, because I feel like it has bookends now, or it's complete. I don't know how else to describe it.
I like that it's complete piece, because so often the really difficult things we go through, yes, they have a beginning and end in terms of like the event itself, but the way that it affects us, the emotions, the things can be triggered. And it comes back over and over. It's like often when people lose a parent, uh, we expect to lose our parent, right? Like at some point in life, and yet
Right.
grief is different for everyone, and it's not dealt with by the time the memorial service or celebration of life happens, right? It
Right.
comes back on anniversaries, it comes back on birthdays, it comes back with certain memories. And so it's like wave after wave. And it's the same with our healing. I often talk about it being a little bit like an onion, that, you know, you do the big healing, the big layers of the onion, and then all of a sudden something happens and there's another layer
It's
that we
true.
have to work through.
Right.
So was that kind of your experience too?
Definitely, definitely. And I would also say, just want to say thank you for, I looked at you as being my accountability partner, because sometimes when there's something difficult, we put it off. And I'm the queen of procrastination. And I would put it off until the last minute, as you know, if you look at my submission times. When you would give me a submission time by midnight of such and such a date, it was usually midnight or even a little bit after when I got that thing submitted. So it was really good to have a deadline that pushed me to push through, because there were more, as much deep healing as I've done, I continue to be amazed that there's yet another layer of healing under there that can take place. And this book has helped me to do that for sure.
Well, and I think that's true for most of the authors, no matter their story in this book, and even in the first book, The Gift in Your Story, because just the act of, as you said, like making a timeline, writing it down, working through all of the things, and really coming to the like, what do I have now that I didn't have before? What have I learned? What are the good things that I have in my life that I wouldn't have had otherwise? How am
Right.
I positively impacting others? Or how has this changed the trajectory of my life? Those things show that there's some kind of purpose. I mean, it doesn't make up for hard stuff at all, but it does give us that added purpose, or that added like, oh, that there are blessings to come from this.
Right. And there are, even working through the hard things. Um, it was very interesting to me. In order to do this and piece it together, I wanted to make sure that I was honoring my memories and making sure they were correct. And
Mm.
so it brought on and spurred a lot of conversations with those that were around me, my family and friends who are around, who were there, that
Mm.
I made me have conversations with them just to make sure, am I remembering this correctly? Or do you have anything to add to this? Or, is there something I missed or didn't connect? And in those conversations, having those conversations brought so much more to the content that I wrote, because they did fill in gaps and they did fill in pieces that I had forgotten, or things that I had never connected before. And so there became a whole lot more healing and deeper healing and understanding and lessons that came from writing it out, um, just through having those conversations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I think that's the really important piece about people diving into their stories, understanding them, and then sharing them, because it does kind of force us to look at all those pieces. And I love that you did the work of reaching out to other people and not just trusting your own memories or the stories you had been telling yourself, but you asked other people for their recollections so
Right.
that it was maybe more full and more correct.
Right. And interestingly, having those conversations made me realize, as much as we had talked around the situation, all right, that I had with all of those people that I spoke with, um, we never really had talked through it in the way that this caused us to, and how important that is, because there were pieces of the puzzle that got solved, not just for me, but for them as well, because we had a reason to go there. I think it's easy when you're experiencing difficult times and dark times to not want to go there in conversation or shy away from it. but this kind of forced the issue, and it was easy to, because I was doing this, it made it easy to say, hey, I'm doing this, I need your help, and will you talk through this with me? And so we did, but there was some hard conversation there, but at the same time, it brought a new connectedness and a new level of relationship, I think, with these people, because of that conversation, and more healing and more freedom for all of us. And I think all of us saw from a little different perspective because we made connections that we hadn't made before.
Right. And I love that it goes beyond you and your experience, that healing, that all of those pieces. And I know you haven't heard this yet, but I know from people that have read it, your chapter already, because we're recording this before the release of the book, but I have heard from a few people, everybody I know that has read it, has been impacted by it. And part of that is the universality of our human emotion, and how when we read someone or hear someone sharing their story in a vulnerable and open way, including the emotion, we feel that. And whether we've had the same experience or not, it can heal us on some level because we are going through those emotions with the storyteller. And I think that's super important because everybody that I know that has read it has cried with you and has felt so much of the emotion that you have poured out on the page in a really positive way. And they're not left crying. I want anybody who hasn't read it yet or heard it yet to know that they're not going to be left in a depressive state, because you have a lot of things that you learned and that you're focusing your life on now. It's given you some new purpose and everything. So again, we're dancing around your story here, but can you tell us what some of that new purpose is without giving it away?
So that's an interesting thing. Some new purpose, I think, for me is recognizing at a deeper level the power of our story. And I know I've learned from you and heard from you about the power of our story. And from day one, I've been sharing my story, but this is a whole different level. And I think because it's a different level, it's given me a different perspective of the power of your story and how important it is to be willing to share. And that doesn't mean you have to be willing to share in the way you are or the way I am. But if you are willing to have that vulnerability just where you are in life, and whether it's a friend who experiences something difficult, or if it's a coworker or someone, who's on your kid's soccer team or someone you bump up against, if we start being brave and taking off our mask and being willing to share our story, it's amazing how it opens up the door for other people who've maybe been locked in that prison to be able to have the courage to say, hey, me too. Hey, I've experienced this too. I just experienced that when I was at the conference that I was just got home from. I had opportunity to share my story, little bits of it, with some folks that I sat around a table with, just because they were asking, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And from that, there were 3 different women who just mean the world to me. I just met them and they feel like friends because they experienced and have experienced some of the same things. Not all of them are the same. And I would say nobody's story, no one's story is more important or more difficult than someone else's. That's the thing I would think I want to scream from the mountaintops in all of this, is that it doesn't really matter. I was thinking about this. If your house gets destroyed by a tornado, it doesn't really matter if it was an F3 or if it was an F6 or whatever the highest number is, it still got destroyed, right? It doesn't really matter if the storm that came to you was a flood and it washed your house away. Your house is now gone, right? Is one of those more important or more difficult than another? No, because it impacted you and it impacted your home, your heart. And so, it really bothers me when people want to compare and say, oh, well, I haven't gone through what you've gone through, or, oh, your story's harder than mine. You know what? I wish we could put that aside, because I don't think that's true. When you experience something and you go through it, it affects you, and that is valid. And we need to start validating that what you've gone through is significant and it does impact you. And we should not be comparing our story to someone else's story. Your story is valid to you and what happened to you and the destruction or darkness that it brought to you. And that's valid. and not to be afraid to share that with other people, or don't shy away from sharing it because you think, oh, my story isn't as significant as this other person's. That's a lie. And I just want to call that out. That is a lie, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I often say, like, someone making that statement, I haven't been went through what you've been through, my story is nothing like yours, whatever, is such a subjective statement, right? Because it's from that person's experience. And the truth is that we all normalize our experiences. So you've been through difficult things, I've been through difficult things, but they become, sure, in the moment they're extremely difficult, but then they become part of our lives. And it's just what we deal with. It's just what we've been through. We've learned something, we move on, we keep living. And you could be exchanging stories with someone, and their story is so different from yours and so different from your experience that you go, oh, I haven't experienced that at all, and have the same thing. But it's so subjective based on what your experience is. And it's hard for us to step out and be objective about other people's stories and not compare them to our own,
Right.
which we kind of lessen the impact of the longer we live with it.
Mhm.
So I totally agree with you that I wish more people would embrace the power of their story and stop comparing to my story, to your story, to anyone's story.
Right. Right. Because I believe everyone has value, and the experiences that you've had are of value, and to be shared with someone else adds value to that person. Whether or not we share the same experience or not, we can still learn from each other's difficulties.
Yeah. And it does come back to that emotion, the commonality of emotion.
Right.
So I might have lost my house. You might have lost a parent. Jill over there might have lost a job, but it's still loss. And
Right.
so I can connect with Jill or with you or whoever because of that commonality of loss. It's
Right.
not the same loss, but it's still loss that we all understand.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think that's what's important. And that's what I would love it if more people would understand that their story has value because of that commonality of emotion and human connection.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Oh, I could go on with this. I totally could for, for a long time. So it was hard to do this. It was more difficult than you expected at times, but is it something you would do again?
100%. 100%. And I'm looking forward to doing books again. I want to write more books. I have more to say. I have a lot to say. People are going to be like, shut that girl up. No, I totally look forward to it. And again, I'm thankful for this opportunity, because it's been something I have been procrastinating about. It's been something on my heart. I've written a whole lot. I have chapters, I have names of chapters, I have topics, I have all of these things. And I haven't moved forward on it because I don't know how. And walking through this with you has really shown me steps to take. And it's given me a lot more confidence to say, okay, I can do this, and I can do this again.
Awesome. I love that. Well, for those listening, you really want to get the book and read Kelly's story. Just saying, if we haven't made you curious enough by now, I think that everybody who reads it can experience another level of healing. So I encourage people to do that. Kelly, thank you again for being on here. We will share your social media links and everything. They are in the book, but we will share them on our socials and everything so people can connect with you. I could go on and on with us, but I want to respect your time and the audience's time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly.